Good morning, Titans fan. Welcome back into another edition of the Morning Glory Show. Hey, if you're checking us out today, God bless you for still being plugged into this team and the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, they drop another game to the Jacksonville Jaguars last Sunday, 10-6, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. A little bit of a snoozer, but we appreciate you guys. And if you're checking out the show for the first time, do us a couple favors. Head over to YouTube, hit that like button, and we're in the seasons of giving right now. Give us a subscribe as well. Hit that notification bell. Join me, Jake Robertson at Glory Day Sports, and Jonathan Miller at Esports Valen. And also go follow B Will at TFTV and TFTV Sports. But how you doing today, Jonathan?
Doing okay, man. I wish my headphones would work properly. That's why I'm on mobile here. But aside from my technical difficulties, doing okay, I guess, as best as a Titans fan can do in these dark, dark times where we drop a game to a team that we definitely should not have lost to.
Yeah, we were saying it by week 8 that this team can no longer hurt us. We're not hoping for wins. We're hoping to see improvements, and we're hoping for great draft position right now so we can be in line for another premium position it'll add. Having that be quarterback, edge position, another wide receiver, right tackle. We can get into the weeds on as far as that goes. But just going back to last Sunday, we saw maybe what I would consider Callahan's worst game, that being Brian, not Bill. We see, I don't understand it. I don't get it. They trust Will Levis nowhere outside of the red zone. As soon as we get down there in the weeds, that's when he wants to throw the football. And I don't get it, especially how you open up that game, running with Tony Pollard 8 straight times, really just taking it to the Jacksonville Jaguars and say, hey, this is how we're going to beat you, and just kind of getting away from it and just not converting once you get in those scoring positions. What did you think about just Will Levis's performance altogether? Just because you had some unkind words for him, we'll say, in the group chat after that game. So I'll let you get into it.
I did, yeah. I became a fan really quickly, and I know you guys know that about me now because we've shared a group chat for a while now. But yeah, when these games happen, I'm very much a fan. I'm an emotional fan, and then give me a couple hours, and then I turn into a logic-centered individual. But yeah, it for me that game was. Lucas Panzica had a really good opinion on this on the Music City Audible, which is a show that I love to watch. So shout out to the Justins. But
Yep.
Lucas put this perfectly. He kind of shares my opinion in that I think this was not necessarily regression from Will Levis, but it was bad in the ways that you needed him to be good. And what I mean by that is yes, he's not making any of the back-breaking turnover plays, and though he has turnover-worthy plays that he's getting away with, I might add, um, it's not like, oh, he's going to go out there and lose you the game. But we're at a part in his development where we're past that, right? Like he's improved in those areas that we needed to him improve in from the earlier part of the season. And now we need to see him take over games. We need to see him be the reason why the Titans win. I've been saying it for a long time. We need a quarterback that we are winning not out, in spite of. So for him, he misses an egregious read on Chigakonkwo for a very easy touchdown, the easiest touchdown that he would have thrown all season. And we could beat a dead horse there, but it was a really egregious miss. And then he had a ball that, some people can argue should have been caught by Nick Westbrook-Akina in the corner of the end zone. I thought he probably could have got that ball out sooner, and he actually mentioned that in his press conference directly after the game, that he was going through his reads, and then basically he was seeing that shell, that safety sitting in that zone, and he held it a little longer to make sure he wasn't going to throw into that safety. So a part of me is like, okay, he's being really careful about making the good decision. But at the same time, the next step in his progression is to be able to see, okay, I know the route that I'm gonna have him in the corner. If he could have just got there a little faster, then I think that's a better ball for Nick, and I think it's more catchable. But at the same time, on that same play, he has Calvin Ridley coming open on kind of like a middle cross route where he had him. Was it not in the end zone, sure. But he had him pretty open. He's just a complete bubble in the zone there. So my point is that he needed to be he needed to be better in areas that are not the same issues that he's been having. And so a part of me is encouraged because it's like, okay, now he's kind of developing like the next step of read progression, right? It's like, okay, he knows he's being calm about where he needs to go, but now he just needs to get a little bit quicker. Now it's like NFL read progression, right? It's post snap, find the guy, get there faster. He was about a step too slow in several moments in this game. And the unfortunate part is that these were game breaking plays, right? So if he makes the right read, if he gets that ball out faster, if he makes the right read, like on one of these 4, 5, 6 plays, then we're talking about a Titans win, which is what we definitely should be talking about after a piss poor Jacksonville team comes in and just basically skates by you in the last minute. And that's the worst part of this game. And that's where I kind of agree with you on the Brian Callahan thing. This is the first game of the season where I think the coaching staff underperformed that affected the outcome essentially. And so like the 8 runs straight out of the gate, you open up the game with it. Part of me, after like run 4 or 5, I was like, you know what? Screw it, run it down their throat.
Mhm.
If Tony Pollard's just going to take them to town, like let him do it. But then by like run 5 and 6, I'm like, okay, we need to mix in some pass here. We need to get Will Levis involved. The line of scrimmage is moving. You're getting favorable second and third downs. Give him the ball. Let him open it up here. You open up with the screen. That's really the only opportunity that he gets a chance to throw the ball, and then you stall out and you have to take a field goal. And so to me, that was not good. Obviously, you want to go away with a touchdown every drive, but to me, that the play calling situationally, if I had to guess, their script wasn't run the ball 8 times in a row
Mhm.
to start it and then throw. You know what I'm saying? They probably opened up with a couple runs. Tony Pollard had some big ones, and then Brian Callahan said, "Okay, we're going to run it down their throat this drive." And that's not the wrong thought process, but maybe you mix in some pass in there as well, like a second and short or a second and medium, whatever. You got to get Will Levis involved and you got to mix things up. And so there were definitely situations where Brian Callahan didn't set Will Levis up for success, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, this game was bad on so many levels, but to me, the greater takeaway is that we didn't see Will Levis be the reason why his team won. And
Yeah.
to be completely honest with you, like that final drive, I'm like, okay, this is perfect. This is exactly where we want to be in the evaluation process. Whether the Titans win or lose, here we go. Will Levis has, I forget what it was, 40 seconds or maybe more after the first stalled out drive. They end up getting the ball back with, I want to say, under a minute or maybe a little over a minute of time left in that final drive. And you're like, okay, let's see him do it. And they don't do it. And to me, that is a massive red flag from the quarterback position. Now, granted, it's not all on him, but no pun intended, you got to will your team to victory sometimes. And he had 2 chances to do it at the end of the game, and he couldn't get it done.
I think you put it pretty well. I think this was the Brian Callahan, Will Levis experience to the extreme. Obviously, they didn't put the score on the scoreboard, of course, but Brian Callahan, he's come out with those opening drives all season, and I've really liked those play calls. And he was malleable in that. I agree. There was probably not 8 straight runs on the call sheet, so it shows that he can adjust on the fly. My question is, why can't they do that in the second half and every other drive going forward? That's what really bothers me. And then Will Levis, like you said, I think for the show, Stoney Keeley probably coined the phrase. I think it was last offseason that Will Levis, the biggest thing about him is he's operating on a half-second delay. He's seeing everything
Yes.
just slightly behind where he should be
Yes.
seeing them. And it's unfortunate because we've come off these last 4 games since Will Levis has come back with that injury, and we saw progression. We saw improvement. And then it feels like we watched Sunday and he's regressed back to where he was. So maybe that's just what Will Levis is. And we have 4 games remaining in the season, and maybe he can put it together another 4 games of growth. And maybe that's what we're hoping for, Titans fans. But at the same time, is that good enough? Is it good enough to just be average? Because that's what Will Levis has been, even in those improved games. He's not been a great quarterback. The Houston game, probably his best performance to date, but
Yep.
we got to see more from it. And that comes down to this coaching staff again. We bring in Brian Callahan because he's this offensive minded head coach. And as of right now, the Titans rank 30th in points scored on the season. I believe New England and Carolina are the only two that are ranked lower than them currently. And then
Won't stay
that
that
just
way for
weighs
long. Carolina's going to jump us.
Bryce Young. I mean, people gave me a B Will shit when Will Levis went down with injury. We're like, hey, I mean, they benched Bryce. I mean, maybe that's a good swap. I mean, that looks correct. He's playing like a number one overall pick right now. And we'll see if that continues. We know with the size and all that stuff, health could be a big concern with him down the road as well. But right now, Bryce Young is showing out. He's showing his ass right now. But going back to
one second. Yeah, hold on. There, you touched on something that I kind of want to talk about, and it reminded me. I think the evaluation process that we're currently in for Will Levis. Here's the interesting thing. In these past 5 games now, where we've seen something click for Will. He's been noticeably better in many areas. The worst part is that he has moments where he is the reason why the offense is moving well. He's throwing the ball accurately. He's on time. He's extending plays. He's doing all the things you're like, oh wow, this is great. But then when he has these moments where, and this is kind of in the defense of Will Levis, to be fair, just to be completely objectively fair, I think he has these moments where he gets into the groove and you're like, okay, we're starting to see something from him. And then his offensive line or his receivers just completely let him down, right? There's a big sack. There's a big penalty that calls back a touchdown. I mean, that happened in the game against Jacksonville. Dylan Radins got called on I think a hold, where it was that drive ended in the Tony Pollard touchdown. Not the first one, but the drive that I'm talking about. And that would have been enough to win the game. So that was a Dylan Radins penalty that called back a touchdown. I mean, there's several moments like Calvin had a drop or two that were 100% on him. There were some things that Nick Westbrook-Akine, as hard of a catch as that would have been, it was still technically catchable, right? So it's like you can't in one breath we can point the gun at Will Levis and say this is on you, man. You have to be better, and that's true. But also, there are many times where his offensive line or his receivers are not doing him any favors. And so you mix in the, consistent, not perfect play of Will Levis, which is fair because he's still developing. So there's still areas where it's 100% on him, no one else. But then to be fair, there are many moments where his offensive line or his receivers are letting him down, where he put the ball on a good spot. He sat in the pocket, took the hit, delivered the ball on time, and it just got dropped. Like there's many times where this entire evaluation process where you lose to the Jaguars, where you should have beat them, by the way. We're not nearly as harsh or critical, or maybe this game goes into the bucket of this was good for Will Levis, but his team kind of, let him down. So I just, in my evaluation of this game, to me, it leaned a little bit more heavily on Will Levis because there were things that he could have directly done that would have caused the game to go in the other direction. But at the same time, if we're being completely fair, there were things that his teammates did that completely shot him and the team in the foot that weren't his fault. So this evaluation process is extremely difficult. And so we have 4 more games to look at him and see how he's going to perform and if they can pull off some wins where they probably shouldn't. And in classic Titans fashion, you lose, you're officially out of the playoffs, and now they're going to go out there and absolutely show their ass and be an awesome offense and put it all together when there's just nothing to lose, because that's what we do. So they'll end up getting, probably 3 of these 4 wins where they shouldn't. And who knows? Like if Will Levis is just kind of, if we feel the same way about him today, like if the season ended today, I don't know where I would land. I legitimately don't know where I would land because another factor too, Jake, is like, where do the Titans fall in the draft order? Because if it's outside of the top 5, then we're not even talking about a quarterback. And the only quarterback we can really talk about, there's only one of them. And I don't want to hear I'm in the fan base, I'm hearing like a lot of people like being really high on Drew Aller, saying like, oh, we could get him in the second round. It's like, guys, you're just going to get another Will Levis. You're going to get another guy who's a development, he's a project, and then you're setting your team up for the same type of result. You know what I'm saying? Like they're different guys, yes, and they have different skill sets to a degree, but these are almost the same quarterback from a developmental standpoint. So like what are we talking about? So again, that we're going to be able to speak on that very heavily come this off season, but for the sake of staying on topic within the season, Will Levis still has a chance to make this evaluation process easier for us. And if he is the guy that you can at least feel good about moving forward in 2025, then this is at least a much easier situation for the Titans of fixing this roster because now you don't have to add quarterback to that list.
No, I'll just say I like Drew Aller. I
Of
like
course
him,
you
but
do.
he's just a slightly better version of what Will Levis brought to the table when he was coming out of the draft. But again, I don't think I would spend that high capital pick on him, especially if it's top 10. Hell no.
Drew,
I'm
just
out
go
on
back to
that.
school, brother. Don't do that
Yeah,
to us. Just go back to school.
I think Drew will come out just because he's going to be QB3 with Garrett Nussmeyer
Nussmeyer,
returning to
yeah.
school. And Jalen Milrow, I'm assuming, is going to return. So it's going to be Shador
Really?
Campbell. And then I would assume so. Jalen, I think, is going to go back to school just based off how this kind of played out. I think he'll go back and be first round pick next year. But while we're talking about that, let's talk about the comment section. We got Stevie and MB in the comments. So we appreciate you guys tying up. And good morning, gentlemen. Stevie brought up a good point. He said he had chance after chance referring to Will Levis in that game, though. And it just kind of
Yeah.
comes down to, and I've almost shifted my thought concept of kind of coming into the year. We were evaluating Will Levis and Will Levis alone, trying to find that answer. I've kind of come back and I've gone, okay, we are going to continue that, but I'm also trying to evaluate Brian Callahan now. I think they're not moving on from him this season. By no
No.
means. You should
No.
not. So don't hear what I'm not saying, but there are things that I'm seeing from what we're getting out of the Callahan experience that I'm not happy about. And I think he's come out and he's been very good with the media. Love that. And it's such a shell shock to what we saw with Mike Vrabel, which I've seen brought up on several radio shows and podcasts this week. Let's not bring up the X. It doesn't matter. If Mike Vrabel was in these same shoes, the result of this season is the exact same, in my opinion. He squeaks out 2 to 3 maybe games, Chicago, maybe Jacksonville. I don't think he wins in Houston. I think as we progress through the season, it doesn't matter. This team did not believe in Mike Vrabel by the end of his time in Nashville. What I questioned is can Brian keep that confidence in the team moving forward? And you hear comments from like Jeffrey Simmons this week saying, hey, years like this, you're playing for that name on the back of your jersey. And I think what he's trying to get at is, hey, you're playing for a contract if you're one of these lower player guys, but I want you playing for that logo on the side of the helmet. I want you being a team first guy. And that's what builds the culture, I think. So Jeffrey Simmons, I know, maybe not the best with the media, as we found out in years past. Almost knocked out Buck just this offseason. So we can talk about that. But I really think Callahan is going to go into next season in that position. And everybody brings up the Dan Campbell stuff. He started 4-19-1, and then he turns it around. I think
it's fair.
It's fair. But I think they're
fair.
very different coaches coming in. I mean, Campbell is that player of men guy, that coach of men. And Callahan was this offensive-driven, minded, analytically based guy. I think Dan grew into that CEO-esque head coach role like Vrabel was in, where Callahan is never going to be that, in my opinion. I think he's going to be the guy that is calling the plays his entire career here. And we have to see improvement in that regard. But he has to build this offense around it. Denard Wilson, if he walks out the door tomorrow, this defense is right back to square one, in my opinion. And I think Denard Wilson feels done a great job
right now. This defense does not feel good, guys.
I think
yes, they're good to a degree, right? But like, I'm not. For the first time ever, I'm like, okay, maybe we're keeping Denard. And look, I'm with it. I still love him as a coach. This is still a good defense they're kind of getting screwed by the offensive production, which is totally understandable because they are literally bottom two offensively, and they have been this entire season. So it's not. I'm not putting it all on the defense, right? But what I'm saying here is that there's areas for improvement on all sides. But I wanted to touch on something with Brian Callahan that you just mentioned. For me, Brian Callahan's ceiling is Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay,
Mhm.
Kevin O'Connell, those types of guys, right? Like that's the type of coach he is. We don't need him to be Dan Campbell or Mike Vrabel, right? Because those are basically your two buckets of coaches. Like Dan Campbell is always going to be the motivator, the leader of men. That's great. We had that. And there is a success tied to that. But I can tell you right now that if Ben Johnson bounces, which he will
Mhm.
eventually, probably after the season, then Dan Campbell's going to be put in the same position that Mike Vrabel got put in after the success that the Titans had going to the AFC Championship game, right? It's like your offensive mind that's done a great job of putting that together is going to leave, and then now you have to replace that coach, and you're always going to be in that cycle of replacing that coach, right? So I think obviously Dan Campbell, I think, is more of an offensive mind. He played tight end. He was kind of, offensive guy, which differs from Mike Vrabel. But yeah, the style of coach that Brian Callahan is what the Titans need, is what a modern offense needs.
Yes.
Now, just because we have not had success through that, I think that there is a fair window of time that you have to give Callie to get acclimated to being a head coach because he's not just calling the offense. He's also overseeing the team. He's overseeing clock management. He's paying attention to challenges. He's paying attention to defensive assignments and adjustments that need to happen. He's kind of keeping his eyes close to Denard and being a part of that process. So all of the things that a head coach has to worry about, and on top of that, he's got like eyes on the back of on your neck. 67,000
Mhm.
eyes on your neck, right? And so there's a lot of factors to being a head coach, and when you're the head coach for the first time, there's a lot of adjustment, right? So to me, the first year, this year was never going to be the year, right? You get a year under Callie's belt. It's not just quarterback. It's not just Will Levis development. It's your head coach's development as well. It's your coaching staff's development. Callahan's going to get better. He's going to improve. He's going to be able to take a look at the things that he was doing on certain days and be like, "Oh, that was dumb. I shouldn't have done that." And that's the same thing he's doing week to week, right along with Will Levis, right? It's not just the players who are being evaluated here. So I think that is something that's fair and should get talked about. And before we end here, Jake, I do want to point out Chef Rand had an interesting comment about Sam Darnold. So I want to take a small part of the show before we hop off today and talk about like what if, like okay, if Will Levis ends up not being the guy, truly
Mhm.
what are the Titans' options? I think that's kind of an interesting conversation if we can squeeze it in. I don't know what you have for the rest of us for the show, but I thought
No,
that
go
was
for it.
interesting because
Yeah.
I have some thoughts.
Yeah, let's hop into it. Sam Darnold obviously has a huge game last Sunday, and a lot of that's predicated off that receiving core and that offense that he is playing behind. But I think what you're trying to get out of Callahan is we'll get a good dose of what Callahan could be this Sunday. We go and see Zach Taylor and Cincinnati Bengals when he comes from that. And a lot of that offense is driven through the quarterback position. And Sam Darnold, I think he's like 26 still. This is not an elder statesman
Yeah.
by any means. He came into the draft very young and flamed out and has had a renaissance. So I'm full on board with that just because of if Callahan starts next season like this season started, I think Amy Adams could pull the trigger and say, "Hey, you're not our guy." And then from there, we're looking at a interim head coach Denard Wilson for the remainder of that season to let him test that out. So I think at the end of the day, you have to fix the quarterback position next year. And maybe Will Levis can be the guy. And we see that in the next 4 games, and he earns that trust. Will he do that? Very up for debate. Sam Darnold has proven that he can be a upper end quarterback this season. So at least we've seen touches of that. And we know he has the physical talent just based off why he was drafted as highly as he was. So I think you have to find somebody for that position for sure. Definitely.
I mean, here's the thing. Here's where I'm at with that. One, there's a really strong chance that Sam Darnold does not leave Minnesota for two reasons.
100%.
One, it's not just his familiar, like it's not. I mean, one, it's the familiarity with the coaching staff, right? You got to think Sam Darnold has had success with the Vikings And he has been on other teams and not seen that same success. So you got to think in the back of Sam's mind, is he saying, hey, I'm balling in this system. I have the best receiver in football. I have one of the best tight ends in football, and I have an emerging wide receiver too, who is looking amazing, right? And then on top of that, we have a good backfield. Our offensive line is well put together, and we are very well coached. So players don't necessarily want to leave that. So he might be willing to take a smaller, more team-friendly deal just to stick around for that fact alone, right? Obviously, you have JJ McCarthy, who was looking very promising. So the Vikings have an interesting decision to make. But here's the thing. If you have a hot hand in Sam Darnold, maybe he just comes back for a year or two, and JJ just gets the Jordan Love treatment, and he just sits, which they're totally fine with. By the way, it's the same thing for the Titans. Do you think the Titans, if they move off of Will Levis, they're just going to cut him or trade him? Absolutely not. No, he's going to sit
Yeah, he's
right
not
there
going
on his
anywhere.
rookie deal. He's going to sit right there. And if something happens to your starter, if they decide to go in a different direction, then they're going to move to him. It's just that simple. The only way that doesn't happen is if they draft a rookie. But I just don't, unless you're drafting Shador Sanders, I don't think that that's going to happen. So regardless here, the quarterback situation is really interesting, but the options outside of that will be, you know, who knows? Like, what do the Vikings do? Like, do they open that up or just let him go, and then Sam gets a chance to go wherever he wants? That's a strong possibility. Also, he might just play the field and see what the options are out there, which could make some sense for him too. But yeah, for the Titans, I don't hate a bridge quarterback if you decide that Will is not the guy. Obviously Sam Darnold, the way he's playing, like who knows if he's able to recreate that success in a completely different system on a team with different weapons, like and that just goes. And when I start thinking about other quarterbacks, I start thinking about what our offense actually is right now. And the fact that, you have a revolving door at right tackle, you have receivers who have been not great. Like not getting Tyler Boyd as involved has been kind of puzzling to me because he feels like such a strong, like he's such a reliable catcher of the football. So how little he's been kind of fed is kind of crazy to me. Calvin has been hot and cold, but mostly disappointing for the amount of money that you paid him, I would say. And then of course, like having D Hop kind of inflated our expectations in a way just because of the player he was, but they couldn't really handle all those cooks in the kitchen. So I think what's going to happen, this is just I'm going to say this right now. So going into week 15, my prediction for the Titans offseason is I think that Will Levis they're going to end up sticking with him because I think you're probably going to see enough in the next 4 weeks that will be encouraging for Brian Callahan to say, okay, I can fix this guy. Like I can do it. I just need more time. And then what will likely happen is that the Titans are going to be fixated on adding a elite receiver in the draft in that top pick. You have three guys, in my opinion, who are very, very, very talented receivers who could be legitimate wide receiver ones, maybe two of them at least. But I think they're probably going to end up they'll want an elite receiver early in the draft, and then they'll probably try to fill that right tackle position either in free agency, which is probably what they should do, or take what the tackle. Obviously, we're not going to get into draft talk too early, but there are a lot of like pretty good tackles in the top like 40 or 50 picks. So I think that there's a good chance. And now the Titans need a right tackle. That is far easier to come by in the draft, especially like at the top of the second round, for example. So I think the Titans go receiver tackle to start things, unless of course like an Abdul Carter or something like that falls into their lap. They might have to make a tough decision there. But I think Brian Callahan is going to say, I want a young, talented. He's going to say, I want my Jamar Chase to
Yeah.
pair with Calvin
Yeah.
Ridley and NWI and kind of go forward on that.
No, I would agree. There's probably three receivers in that top end if they go that route, and that being one very not conversational one, but I guess yeah, and that being Luther Burden out of
Yep.
Missouri, Ted McMillan out of Arizona, and then
Yep.
will he play receiver? Will he play cornerback?
He's going
Travis
to be a
Hunter.
receiver.
I agree, and we don't have to get into it too much, but when I look at Travis Hunter, what I think is going to happen is he would be a better corner at the next level. He's going to get paid at wide receiver, though, and I think that's what's going to lead to. So that's kind of where I'm at as well. I think they ride with Will Levis probably next year, and Chef Ran and MB in the comments kind of agreeing with that, just because I think this team is 1 year away, one off season away, before they can afford to bring in just a veteran quarterback, a one-step guy. I don't care if you bring in Sam Darnold. I don't care if you bring in Patrick Mahomes and put him on this team. The results are not a Super Bowl. It's not one step away at this point in time. Let's get a receiver. Let's get a tackle. Let's get an edge in there. Let's rush the passer. I'm still on board with Denard Wilson. I love him as a DC. I agree. I think he will be here next season just based on it. And I think a lot of what we're seeing this year is based on points given up, which I think they rank 27th in points allowed this year. A lot of that is predicated off awful special teams. Colt Anderson, fire him into the sun. He'll be gone next year. The offensive minds just not putting it together on the field, allowing that special teams to put that punt unit out there. And when you just even look at this last game, the secondary, I mean, we're rolling out a rookie in Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Darrell Baker. And I mean, Jarvis Brownlee, 10 targets, allowed 10 receptions. Not great there, but only 54 yards. So, I mean, 5.4 yards per target. I mean, it's still pretty decent. And Darrell Baker, he allowed one reception against Brian Thomas Jr., and that was it. So you're getting production out of these players. And maybe this offseason, Rand will come at this and look and say, hey, we threw money at this cornerback room and Cheeto. We draft Jarvis. We bring in, obviously, Snead. We bring in this Diggs in the back end. And we've kind of seen it through these injuries that, hey, maybe Denard can do some stuff with maybe the most not talented players out there. Get him guys that fit his scheme, and he'll be fine there. But then you come to this edge group, they are not getting after the passer because the Jimmies and Joes are just not matching up with the X's and O's at this point in time. Get in at Abdul Carter. Throw him out there. Let him rush the passer and allow him to hit those stunts and get inside and cause pressure, because that's when those turnovers will come. We can come back to the linebacker room, which I think is very concerning. Obviously, I'm the biggest Kenneth Murray supporter. Has not played great. Obviously, dealing with the hamstring injury last week. Did not practice yesterday as well. I don't anticipate seeing him this week. But then you throw out a guy like Otis Reese, had a decent game last week. Why can't Cedric Gray and James Williams see snaps over a guy like Luke Gifford?
I think there's a chance that they do. I think there's a chance they do in these last 4 games.
Didn't happen last week,
right?
They didn't touch the field.
I think it goes to show, like, I don't want to hear like the Jack Gibbons hype anymore. Like, if you stick somebody in at Mike Backer in this defense, and they're going to total 10 tackles. You know what I'm saying? Like, they just are. You're going to get pressure up the middle when they run the ball, and these guys are going to find the ball carrier. So I'm not. I don't know. On the defensive side, linebacker, I'm not super worried about. I like Cedric Gray. I think he's got a lot of potential. Hell, I like Kenneth Murray. I think for the most part he's had a pretty successful year in terms of just being in the right place, right time. Like, he's done a good job. He's been okay in coverage. He's been better than what people said he was going to be, which is the worst, linebacker in football in coverage. So I wouldn't say that that's like pressing, but I agree with you. I think, obviously we have plenty of time to have this conversation, but thinking about like an Abdul Carter or like Tet McMillan, for example, like making that decision at like 4 or 5 or whatever is going to be interesting, right? The Titans are going to have a tough decision to make where you feel the need for two pieces, but that's why I'm telling you guys right now, it's going to be receiver. It just is, because they absolutely have to fix this offense. The Titans defense can afford, I know this is going to sound crazy, but in Brian Callahan's eyes, in Rand Carthon's eyes, the Titans have had one of the worst offenses and have had terrible offensive production since the new regime change. And honestly, for majority of the tenure of the last decade plus, right, outside of a couple of successful seasons. And so they have to fix that. If they can fix that, then that is a notch on their belt. That's a, hey, Amy, what you hired us to do, we're doing. And if the defense suffers a little bit because of it, that's exactly what's going to happen. I can tell you guys this right now, because at the end of the day, this offense is atrocious. And at the end of the day, putting points on the scoreboard is what people get excited about. And if this offense is scoring 30 points and we're giving up 24 to 27 points and still finding ways to win the game, then that is a completely successful model. They're okay with that. You can then add pieces and fix that later. But you have three major problems on this team, two of which happen to be on offense. And then you have the pass rushing issue. So that's fine. Like if you find a way to, go trade for Micah Parsons, like throw a one or whatever, there's like, I'm not saying to do that, but I'm just giving an example. Like you can address the edge position at a later date. If edge rushers have big seasons out of nowhere and then get paid all the time, it happens every year. So you're going to have an opportunity to overpay an edge rusher that can legitimately come in and help you next season, every offseason, and so on, so on. But you get very few chances to add a super dynamic young receiver, and you have to be basically picking in the top 10 every single year to get your chance at one of those guys. So the Titans, I promise you, Callahan's going to be like, I need my Jamar Chase. I have to get, because the second that happened for Burrow, it changed how dynamically that offense ran. And I think that Callahan's going to be like, okay, this is year 2, time to start morphing this in a certain way. And who knows, like we've said here, Will Levis could totally be ousted as the guy. And there's a chance that Brian Callahan says, I want to go get one of my guys. Because think about it. Imagine if you took Matthew Stafford and you plugged him into this offense. How much better it hums, right? Because you don't have the 1.5-second delay like that. What's happening on the progression level for Will Levis, right? You like Matthew Stafford doesn't miss Chig, and then the Titans win that game. Matthew Stafford doesn't throw horrible, egregious picks against Chicago, and then you probably win that game. Like we could go game by game and be like, if he was here, and I'm just using Stafford as an example because he's an older guy, back end of his career, and he has a relationship with Callie because he coached him, right? So, but it could be Sam Darnold. It could be, I'm not going to say Daniel Jones because I like my team. But there are other options.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out too. There are other options that the Titans could go that could make some sense. And don't get it twisted. They're going to evaluate it because they can always just sit Will Levis. You see what I'm saying? If it is Stafford, if the Rams were willing to move off of him, let's say because the Titans were willing to move a pick, I'm not saying they would trade a top 5 pick for Stafford because that's egregious. But all I'm saying is that if the Rams were willing to move on because they need to kind of turn the page and find their next quarterback, and Stafford has like a year or maybe 2 left in him, I think he's probably got 1 year left in him, then it makes sense for the Titans because we already have our guys sitting. So you sit Will Levis, you bring in Stafford, you let him operate the offense, and you don't have to worry about quarterback, and you can get competitive right away. Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is those types of conversations are going to start happening regardless of how well he plays. I mean, if Will goes out there and wins all these games and he's a stud and has like 300 plus yard performances and total touchdowns and no turnovers and is looking awesome, then make no mistake, he's going to be the guy moving forward.
He would be the guy moving forward, and that might be my biggest fear. He goes out, wins the last 4 games. Say goodbye to a top 10
when they don't
pick.
matter. When they don't matter, yeah.
Say goodbye to Ted McMillan and Travis Hunter. Say goodbye to Nick Scourton and Dual Carter, and say goodbye to Shador Sanders and Cam Ward because they're gone. They're off the table. So, but at the same time, maybe if you find a quarterback, awesome. But even if he wins these next 4 games and looks amazing, I think there's still going to be question marks going into next season. So maybe it's not a Sam Darnold. Maybe you don't bring in a replacement, but I got to see a better competition going into the offseason with Will Levis. I mean, maybe you're drafting a guy late in the draft. Maybe I don't know if I agree with the one, but Stevie mentioned the comments, Jameis Winston. Maybe you bring in a guy of Jameis's talent level. Jameis is just Will Levis, but he's a meme lord. He's got that going for him. He's got the big arm. The interceptions are going to be there. Maybe he fits the same Will Levis mold and that style that they want to play with. I don't know if that's the one I would go with, but I agree.
He's a very unserious leader.
Yeah,
a very unserious leader.
Not the future by any means. So
interesting though. I do want to say something with Chef Rand said. why trade when you can just sign Sam? Will has one win all season, and I doubt he starts winning now. The problem with the Sam Darnold conversation is that we don't quite know what's going to happen there, right? Like
Mhm.
Sam Darnold is playing like he's the comeback player of the year, 100%. I guess it's not even a debate, right?
Yeah.
He, he's comeback player of the year. I mean, he's playing like close to MVP caliber level of play right now. Like he is
Mhm.
playing otherworldly. So the Vikings are. Here's the thing: put yourself in the Vikings' shoes. You have a guy who's clicking. He's having a renaissance. You're not just going to let him walk because you think you have the guy and the rookie quarterback. JJ McCarthy is a young guy, right? He's going to be 23. He turned 23 this year. Is that right? Or is it 22?
He's probably 23.
Regardless, he's a young guy. He can sit. He can sit there and learn and bake, which is exactly what you want your young quarterback to do anyway. You are not going to turn loose a guy who is playing that level of football for you when you don't know 100% what you have in JJ McCarthy. You can assume, and you're like, hey, you're encouraged by his level of play in the preseason and at the start of the year before he was hurt or whatever, but you don't know. Sam Darnold is giving you everything, right? So if all Sam has to do, I mean, they're the 2 seed, I think, going into the NFC. They're probably not gonna win the
They're up there.
division, but
Yeah.
because Detroit's going to, probably be in the seat there. But regardless, this is a fantastic football team right now, and their defense is playing championship level football. The Vikings can realistically beat anybody in football right now. Like if in the playoffs, like they could take it from anyone. So depending on how well Sam plays, and to be honest with you, he just has to play okay. He doesn't even have to be like 5 touchdown Sam Darnold again for them to be like, okay, this is the guy. They're what? They're like 10-3 or something like that. Like this is a very, very good football team under Sam Darnold. They're not just going to let him walk. There's no chance. I'm telling you right now. And if he goes, he could go into the playoffs and have a not good game, and they could lose first round. They're not going to let him walk. I promise you. And he's not going to necessarily want to walk. That's the other thing. Like that's a favorable situation for him.
I'll say O'Connell. I think he is very confident in his system,
And good
and
coach.
if he just relied on the quarterback position and said, "Hey, you're playing good, I'm going to keep you," Kirk Cousins still might be there in Minnesota. So I think he might roll the dice on that. But I'm not rolling the dice on Sam Darnold this season. If this was a year removed and the team was a little bit better, I could get behind it. But I'm not throwing, like Chef Rand said, 40 mil on a contract per year for Sam Darnold at this point in time. I don't think.
Mm-mm.
Maybe you could talk me into it, but I'm not there just yet. But at the end of the day, this team has to be better. But let's go ahead and start wrapping up for today and get to these picks. And we're talking about the draft. So we're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals game here in a second. But we're looking at these last 4 matchups. We've got Cincinnati Bengals, who is a good team with a bad record. Very much so. And then we got the Colts, who beat us at home already this season. Jacksonville, who just beat us this last Sunday. Give and take. We won 3 of those 4 quarters, I think, and then pissed it away at the very end. And then Houston Texans, who are surprisingly the only team we beat in the division thus far. Which, if you said that before the year, what is happening? But
Yeah.
they're coming to Nashville. So I think they will get their just desserts for sure to end the season, regardless if it means playoff spot or not. But maybe we can play spoiler alert. We'll see. Indianapolis is having a good season for what they're putting on the field. Cincinnati and Indianapolis, those should be flopped. Doesn't make sense. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about all these matchups this week in the AFC South, starting with the New York Jets going against Jacksonville. New York is favored by 3.5 on the road. Then we go Miami versus the Texans in Houston. Houston favored in that matchup. We got Tua coming back and having a resurgence. He is healthy as of now. And then we got Indianapolis
And Tua's balling.
And then we got Indianapolis against the Broncos. Bo Nix coming out this season hot with Sean Payton, and they're definitely showing some things this year. And then to end, we've got the Bengals at Titans. Cincinnati favored by 5, the biggest split on the road. So starting with the Jets and Jaguars matchup, how do you see this one playing out?
I mean, This matchup is going to be
This
a
is
absolute
gross.
snoozer. Yeah, this is yucky. This is a game that you don't want to watch. The Jets favored by 3.5. I can see that. I guess this Jets team is not good, but they are quarterbacked by Aaron Rodgers at the very least. Mac Jones on the other side really was able to just barely squeak out a touchdown against the Titans, and this was, to be completely honest, they should have lost. So I got the Jets for sure. I think they're going to cover, no problem. This game's probably going to be like a 17 to like 7 or 17-3 win or something like that for the Jets.
I am going to the opposite side. I'm going Jacksonville just due to them being at home. These are two really bad football teams. But
Yeah.
man, I just pulled it over. The over under on this game is 40.5. I do not see both of these teams
Slam the
getting over
under.
20 points. I'm going 100% under here, but I'm going Jacksonville. I agree. It could be like a 17-7-esque game. This game could be 7-3 for all I know. But then let's go over to Dolphins at Texans. Like you said, Tua, he's playing hot right now, and Houston has just kind of been that middling team throughout this season. But in the AFC, they've done enough, and I mean they're going to win the AFC South. Sorry to break it to Titans fan, but the Texans are winning the South this year. But
How far off are they from the Colts, though?
I mean, it's got to be just a few games, but I don't think the Colts will do enough
I think that's still kind of open to potentially. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, you got to chalk in the Texans losing to us in Week 18, and then you have to, you know what I'm
They're
saying?
2
Like, who
games back.
knows? If the Colts
Texans
lose to
are
the
8-5.
Titans, then they're
Yeah.
cooked. But yeah,
Yeah. So the Texans 8-5, Colts are sitting at 6-7. So I mean, it's close. It's possible, but that would rely on the Colts winning 3 of their next 4 more than likely, and the Texans dropping the ball. I got back and forth with this game just because of how well the Dolphins are playing. But I
Tua
am going to
is
say
balling, bro.
he is. But I'm going to say the Texans pull this one off at home. I think this will definitely see points on the board. If these two teams, if the Jets and the Jags are the same time, that noon window as the Dolphins Texans, at least you'll get one good game because Tyreek Hill is going to go off. Jalen Waddle is going to have a good game. You're going to get to see Nico Collins and Joe Mixon and then put points on the board. But yeah, I'm going Texans in this one.
I'm going Dolphins. I'm going to take the Dolphins. I actually think that there's a strong chance that they win this game. Tua is just playing otherworldly football right now. I mean, you gotta tip the cap. Like, he's playing very well, and that's honestly more times than not the reason for giving a team the slight edge in a matchup that's going to be close. Like, it's going to be tough, right? Because the Texans defense, their pass rush is really, really good. So, I think that's probably the weakest point of the Dolphins football team. And so a part of me wants to take the Texans for that reason, because I think that's the biggest key matchup of things. And if Tua can't get going, we've seen how that offense sputters. But I mean, they're just doing really well right now. So if they can get the ball out, they got some speedsters. So I think if Mike McDaniel does his job, and they kind of get in their bag a little bit with the playbook situation, then I think they can find ways to get the ball quickly to Tyreek, get the ball quickly to Waddle and Achane, and start moving the chains, because Tua's gonna need some help in that regard. But I think that the Dolphins can outcoach the inefficiencies on their offensive line against the Texans. So I'm gonna take the Dolphins.
So we are splitting it right down the middle at this point in time. You got the Jets and Dolphins. I got the Jags and Texans. Never like being on the side of the AFC South. Yeah, exactly. So that brings us to the Colts at Broncos. Broncos, obviously, being the team that kind of came out the season, has kind of put it all together, and they're playing good football across the board. I mean, the offense isn't amazing, the defense isn't amazing, but they're doing enough as a team. And they're doing the opposite of what the Titans are doing. They're working in cohesion with each other. And then the Colts doing better than what we predicted in the offseason. But at the end of the day, you got Anthony Richardson, a quarterback. You're relying on that run game. I can't take 3 AFC South teams in a row. So I am
Come
going to stick
on.
with the favorite here, and I am going to go with Denver just because I think they are a more complete team at this point in time. They're just a slightly better version of the Colts, and they're at home. So I'm going to take Bo Nix here and think he just puts another one on his belt. And then we can go back to Miami real quick because they're still in the race for this wild card. Buffalo's got
Mhm.
the division. They're not going to catch them. But even sitting at 6-7, I think is where they're at as well. Same record as the Colts. I think they're going to finish the season much hotter than the Colts. And then they're trying to catch guys like Denver as well as the Chargers right now. I think they can catch up to one of those and secure that 7th spot in the AFC. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I like Denver. They have thoroughly impressed me. I did not think this team was going to be playing as well as they're playing, and their defense is really impressive right now too. I mean, just from top to bottom, Sean Payton has this team looking super competitive, and you gotta tip the cap because this is. I just was not. I thought that there was a chance that they could eventually be a contender, just in terms of contending for playoff contention, but I am surprised. I'm just really surprised. Like Bo Nix is a much better player than I thought he was going to be this quickly. Like I knew he had a chance to develop into a special player. I just didn't think that he was going to be able to do it so quickly. So yeah, I mean, this is a really good football team, like top to bottom. So I like Denver in this one. I don't want to say pretty handily, but I think they're going to end up edging out the Colts for sure.
Yeah, I agree there. And that brings us to the final matchup, Titans at Cincinnati. If you guys are in the comment, drop your score predictions like Richard Jr. Titans win by a score of 17-14 on a game-winning field goal by Nick Folk, which Nick Folk dealing with some injuries
Braden
right now.
Darvison by
So
the
yeah, we got
game-winning field goal by
Narwhal out
Braden
there.
Darvison.
We're assuming Norwal is going to be out there,
Yeah.
and we talked about it all this offseason that hey, maybe you roll the dice on Narwhal over Folk. I think we were wrong there. Folk has had a great year. He doesn't have the leg that the Wall has, but he is so consistent, and there's a reason.
This could be the transition time, though. This could be it.
Could
Like
could be.
Depending on how serious this injury is for Nick Folk, maybe they just toss him on IR. I promise you, I don't think it's that serious, but I promise you, there's a chance that if Braden Narvison has like a decent game, which he had some decent games for Green Bay, that there's a chance that Braden could just be the guy moving forward. And then Nick Folk is done after this year, most likely. He's probably retiring anyway. It's the writing's on the wall. He doesn't really have a reason to stay unretired at this point.
Yep.
But yeah, interesting. 17-14, huh? Oof.
He's got 17-14. NB in the chat, 31-20 Bengals. I think this is going to be more along the lines. I am going to take the Bengals as well in this matchup. I don't think the Bengals score 31, though. I don't think they break 30. So I'm going to say 24-13 Bengals win. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Will Levis and this offense show us something this week because they're going up against not a great defense by any means. But based off last week, I got to see more out of them. What about you?
I'm going to do it. I don't know what's possessing me right now. I'm going to take the Titans. I don't know what's wrong with me. I think I'm just a glutton for punishment. I'm going to take the Titans, and I'm going to. This is so dumb because it's not going to happen. But I'm going to take the Titans. I think the Titans end up winning this one, 24-20.
24-20.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why I'm taking the Titans is because as good as the Bengals have looked even in previous years, for whatever reason, there's just an insane buff that the Titans get when they're playing against the Bengals in Nissan. The last time they came was like a year or two ago or whatever it was, and we absolutely trounced them. It was insane. I got sun poisoning that game, I'm pretty sure, which is I didn't even know was a thing. Drank like 12 Miller High Lifes it was like the first like tailgating experience I had. And I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people get drunk and then go sit on the away side. I don't know how they do it. It was brutal. But we trounced the Bengals in that game. And so, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like Brian Callahan revenge game type of thing. The season's over. There's no there's no reason to like be all strung up like, oh no, we gotta win this game. They get to just take the weight off their shoulders and just go have fun playing football. And so I think
Yeah.
that's going to kind of unlock something for Will Levis, and he's going to play unencumbered, just worry-free football. And then I think the same is going to happen for some other guys too. And so I don't know why, but I just have this deep intuition that the Titans are going to find a way to win this game.
I mean,
I hope we lose.
Obviously the team is probably going to get up for Callahan for this one. He wants to go he wants to get this one under our belt. And this has been, and I know Jeffrey Simmons is going to be like on this one, same with Harold Landry and Amani Hooker, just because they couldn't get that Bengals monkey off their back for years and then go and trounce them in the last matchup. But
and Harold Landry is the Joe Burrow killer, by the way. Harold Landry is an assassin. There's a picture of Harold Landry on Joe Burrow's locker, and it's got a red X or a red circle and a line through it, because Harold Landry is an absolute demon playing against the Bengals. So we'll see. I don't know if he'll have Amarius Mims or what the matchup will be for Harold, but the Titans will I'm sure Denard will get in his bag and get strategic and start moving Harold from side to side, and the pressure, the defensive line should be the key to victory in this game. If you can keep Joe Burrow from scoring 20 plus points, and the Titans offense can play, worry-free, who cares football, then I think that's why they can win.
We're due for a good Harold Landry game. We haven't had one since Houston when CJ ran out of the back of the end zone and tried to avoid him. So I think it could be interesting. It could be what I think is going to happen is there's going to be a very close first half, and then the Bengals run away with it, and the Titans fall off like they always do.
That's most likely. Yeah,
I think that's how it's going to play out. But we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much to everybody in the comments. If you choose us out for the first time, make sure you drop that score prediction in the comments below. Leave us a subscribe so you can enter in that chance to win the signed Tajay Spears jersey giveaway. We're closing in on the 1,000 subscriber mark. As soon as we hit that, we'll give that away to one lucky subscriber. And then go check out the shop down below. Get a great shirt like Jonathan Miller is rocking right now. I almost wore mine today as well, but it was a little dirty. But yeah, shout out to MB, shout out to Chef Rand, shout out to Stevie and Deagle and Richard. And yeah, we appreciate you guys. We'll keep doing this every Thursday, regardless of win or loss. And I'm sure B will join us next week as well. He couldn't make it today, but he is dominating us right now with 31 and
taking 14
losses. We're tied up there at 28-17, but this is like the first week we've had in a long time. We're very different. We've got 3 matchups between us, so we will not be tied going into next week. I'll tell you that.
Nope.
And it could be good or bad for one of us. But we got to catch up to B-Will. We'll get his picks later as well. Shout out to everybody in the Glory Day Sports Fantasy Championship. We got those 3 leagues over there. We're entering our playoffs right now. I made 2 of the 3. I'm happy with that. And then we've got our fantasy league as well, between me and Jonathan and all of his friends. So great time.
I did not make the playoffs in that one.
You did not.
But in your
defense, I am the first or second seed.
You're the second seed, and there's 7 picks or something that were made for you to start. So
my team ended up with the Lamar Jackson as the first round pick, which he's had a good year, but don't like grabbing a quarterback that early. So shout out to everybody's fantasy teams. Hope you guys win all of your monies, win your championships, get those belts, get those rings. And then we got the playoffs, college football playoffs getting announced this week as well. So I know those volunteers made it. So at least Jonathan's got something to cheer about. The Sooners did not make it this year, but maybe next year. We'll see. But we love you guys. We'll check y'all later. Peace.